friends, we have discussed about the various perspective in the understanding of Indian society, and in that framework I think we want to add another layer to the understanding of the social phenomenon, especially the perspective which we are referring to is trying to see the history or maybe the discourse in a new way. And here, as we discussed in the subaltern perspective, if you can recall, that subaltern perspective, it tries to understand the society, the history in a specific way. But the subaltern perspective was trying to rework more on the past or the past written documentation. And we today are going to speak about a perspective which of course is nearer to the subaltern perspective. It can fall into the domain of subaltern perspective, but it has to be treated separately, and that is why we are putting it as a important perspective in the Indian framework, that is this Dalit perspective. Now, the Dalit perspective, if you try to see and what Dalit mean to say, how we try to understand the notion of Dalit, I think many questions comes in our mind. And as we say that perspective definitely has its own way of looking to the world. So, we can see that this discourse that we are trying to generate, it may have certain issues. First of all, we have to understand about the meaning of the Dalit in that sense as such. Then we also have to evolve that how the trends of the Dalit perspectives were visible in the Indian society, and finally we also try to understand the contribution of the significant people, and within that we have at least documented two prominent people in that sense. One of course is B.R. Ambedkar and another of course is Gail Omwet, and both the people in that sense they have their own relevance with regard to the understanding of the Dalit perspective. But before talking about the Dalit perspective, we have to really see that to what extent we can speak about the Dalit as a natural discourse, or we can see the Dalit perspective as a meaningful perspective for analyzing the society. Because somewhere whenever we are trying to speak about the Dalit perspective, I think we have some understanding that it has a reductionist understanding towards looking to the society. Like when we try to speak about the Brahminical perspective, in a sense not to Brahminical perspective, but the Indological perspective which was based on literature written by the Brahmins and then trying to understand the Indian society. So, the Dalit perspective is also to be seen from the Dalit viewpoint. So, I think we try to see that these are the two perspectives which has to be seen as a polar opposite, trying to see history and society from a specific viewpoint, from the upper caste viewpoint, and then we try to see the Dalit perspective which has to be seen in terms of a view which has to be seen from the lower caste viewpoint. And both the perspective, definitely wherever we try to speak about from one angle, definitely it will lead to certain problems because it may ignore the other side. So, first of all, we have to see that how we try to see the understanding of Dalit, and in that framework I think whenever we try to speak about the term Dalit, the Dalit represents a politically conscious group of people who are aware of their rights and assert for their dignity. Now, when we say that they are the politically conscious group of people, so the Dalit has to be seen in the political framework. That of course is one thing which we can generate in that sense as such. Saying Dalit means that a group of people who have certain amount of solidarity, integrativeness with regard to a specific agenda or assertion which has been there for a specific cause. And if you try to see, it was basically the Patwardhan's understanding that Patwardhan was basically trying to see with regard to the Pune context, that how in 1960s and 70s we saw the assertion of the political rights which was been associated with the Dalit Panthers in the part of Gujarat and Maharashtra. And in that way we see the categorization of Dalit in a specific sense, that is the politically charged group of people for their own assertion, for their own rights, for their own claim. So the term Dalit to some extent reflect those people, subordinate people, subjugated people who are coming or speaking about themselves in an assertive way and trying to challenge the existing order. That of course is the political connotation, and in that fashion we can look into the things. Here of course I think we have to recall a famous Dalit scholar, that is Guna, and Guna in his writings has tried to speak about that what the Dalit scholar does or what the Dalit does. It tries to put forth the alternative interpretation of the Indian identity. Now in that way we can see that the understanding of Dalit has to be seen as an alternative viewpoint, an alternative interpretation of the Indian identity. And if you try to see in terms of the specific categorization, we say that they have been socially based lower caste, Dalits and the non-Brahmins, all of them are going to be the part of this particular broader gambit of the Dalits. And we try to see that the peasant traditions in the southern India and in the western regions are basically the group of people from where we have the emergence of the Dalit perspective. And in the contemporary times, that is speaking about the prominent leadership in the historical framework, we have n number of people who try to work for the Dalit perspective in a specific fashion. And to name a few, we have Jyotiba Phule, that of course is an important contributor in the field of Dalit perspective. We have B.R. Ambedkar, that we have already stated. Then also we have Periyar, whose contribution also is going to be significant with regard to the understanding of the South Indian Dalit leadership. And apart from that, it also incorporates the contribution of the heroes of the revolt like Birsa Munda, that is another. And then we have Veer Narayan Singh, so that his contribution also is going to be important. So this is of course one understanding about the popular people who has or who can be labeled in the category of the Dalit perspective. Now apart from these categories of peoples, we also have certain claims in terms of the traditions which can also represent the Dalit perspective. Like we have the tradition of Buddha, we have the tradition of Karvakas, and also we have the tradition of Mahavir, then Kabir and Guru Nanak. So these specific traditions which are part and parcel of the Indian society can also be seen as representing the Dalit perspective in a specific framework. And apart from that, we have the heroic figures like Shivaji, who also can be seen in the similar jacket. So in contrast to the secularist opposition to Hindutva, the so-called Dalit perspective, it proclaims a new politics of radically transformed non-Hindu identity. So it's basically a new politics of the non-Hindu composition which tries to represent their identity in a specific fashion, and they define Hinduism as an oppressive caste or an oppressive class or an oppressive patriarchal force. Indeed, the impetus to challenge the hegemony and the validity of Hinduism is the main concern for the Dalit perspective. And we try to see that this is basically the main logic which is behind the Dalit politics. But here one thing that has to be kept in mind, that when we try to speak about the Dalit perspective in this particular fashion, then can we say that anything against Hinduism is going to be part of the Dalit perspective? If the answer is yes, then I think we can have n number of things which has to be part of the Dalit perspective. Like if we try to speak about the Islam, or we try to speak about the Christianity, so they can also be part of the Dalit perspective, but that is not true. The reason being that anything which is against the so called Hinduism may be seen as Dalit perspective assumes to be wrong, because we are talking about the Dalit perspective in terms of an assertion of the group of people or the specific categories of people against their own system. So, the context of what you can say Jainism, the context of Buddha, the context of Mahavir, they can very well figure into the idea of the Dalit perspective, because their concern was to fight against the Hinduism, right. It was not to be seen in a fashion that they are antagonistic to the Hinduism, but a group of followers, a group of thoughts, or the group of ideology which tries to fight against the hegemony of the Hinduism, the wider Hinduism, is the main concern of the Dalit perspective. Like when we try to speak about Hinduism itself has to be seen as having multiple facets. As we know that Hinduism has many ups and downs with regard to adaptation, with regard to reconfiguration, or with regard to adjustment with the different settings, and in that way we try to find out that many such forces which were working against Hinduism in that sense as such does not make it to be a Dalit perspective. So, I think somewhere this is a check rider which I am just trying to propose, that anything anti to Hinduism cannot be seen as Dalit perspective, rather it is basically the subordinate within the Hinduism, or maybe the people who were part of the Hinduism has been what you can say been antagonistic to, or having a sort of a disagreement with the ideology of Hinduism, of that Hinduism, that specific Hinduism, I think can be seen as part of the Dalit perspective. So, in a way we can say that this Dalit politics and the Dalit vision, it requires to go beyond even the term Dalit. That of course is what I am trying to make out, that in the last decade we try to see that most widely accepted word was for the most oppressed and the exploited action of the caste system, and some of the most profound expression of the Dalit vision has come from the Dalit themselves, like the Phule, the Periyar, Kabir, Tukaram, Buddha, all of them have represents the starting point of a long journey towards the social equality and social justice. So, in that way I think now we have to be more correct by saying that anything which is going beyond the understanding of Hinduism, rather which tries to contribute towards making the Hinduism towards equality or towards the social justice, can be seen as part of the Dalit perspective. It indicates that the voices from within which tries to raise up and also assert themselves to fight the evils of Hinduism can be treated as part of the Dalit perspective. So, in that way I think these are certain things which has to be kept in mind when we try to move further. Now, we try to see that the Dalit politics simply can be seen also as a challenge which has been posed by the militant organizations. I think the most vibrant militant organizations which has to be seen is the Dalit Panthers. Dalit Panthers, which were being seen as the volcanoes which were trying to resist the upper caste hegemony. We have the Republican Party, which have their own way of looking to the society in terms of a constructive social order, or we try to see the contribution of the BSP as a party, or we can even include in a broader jacket of the Dalit perspective the attempt by the Naxalite, especially the low caste based Naxalism and the activities associated with them can also be part of the Dalit perspective. So, in that way the Dalit perspective is not region specific, it is not caste specific. Sometimes the ideological what you can say ups and downs and the ideological differences, how they are to be represented and asserted, is part and parcel of the Dalit perspective. And the Dalit perspective seen as a challenge to the Brahmanic hegemony, and it has been a thought of debate since 1970s and 80s that how we can see the Dalit perspective, which is basically seen as a fight against the Brahmanical hegemony. I think at this juncture it is interesting to focus and point out that when we try to speak about the Dalit perspective, in the Indian history, if we try to go back, we try to find out that we had the two categories of people, the Aryans and the Dravidians, and both the categories of the peoples have their own differences. Basically, we say that the Dravidians, which has been seen as the original inhabitants of the Indian society in the southern India or in the different parts of the India, but with the advent of the Aryans, they have been put to the south, and with the hegemony of their own rituals or with the amount of domination, the Aryans, they could supersede the so called Dravidians, and to some extent, or one version says that the so called Aryan are to be seen as the representative of the Brahmins, and gradually we have the emergence of the specific caste system where the Brahmins were seen as the creator of the caste and also trying to have the hegemony over the entire caste system and trying to have their own upper edge and then a source of exploitation for many others. Now, these things are there which can also speak about that how we can have the sort of discrimination when we have the formation of the Hinduism. In that sense, as such, we try to find out that how the Hinduism has been presented. People who have been part of the Hinduism has been put off, and then they have been put at the other side, the Dravidians in that sense as such. So, I think it is a question of challenging the hegemony of the Brahmanical ideology. That of course is a sound ground for understanding the Dalit perspective. And so, it is not a fight against the Hinduism in general, but the Brahmanical tyranny and also the prevalence of the typical upper caste hegemony also is a bone of contention which the people, the activism of the Dalit, they try to project upon. And as I said that within the Dalit perspective, we had two people whom we are going to discuss in detail. Especially we have the contribution of B.R. Ambedkar. B.R. Ambedkar, who has contributed significantly in the understanding of the Dalit perspective, or maybe his contribution can be seen as representing the Dalit perspective, either way we can see. But before going into the detail, let us speak about Ambedkar a bit. Bhimrao Ramji Ambedkar, he was born on April 14th, 1891 in a Mahur town, and it was a small place in Madhya Pradesh province, which is now Madhya Pradesh, but earlier it was the Madhya Bharat, and he was born in a Mahar caste. He was born in a Mahar caste, And if you try to see historically, the Maharashtra was basically the common place, and the native villages of Konkan of the Maratha region were called as Ammavade. And his real name was Ambavadekar. It was not Ambedkar, rather it was Ambavadekar in the name of the village where he lives. And later in 1900, he has got the name of Ambedkar from a Brahmin teacher who was impressed by his intellect, that he has given the name Ambedkar to him. So his name from Ambedkar to Ambedkar was been basically the contribution of a Brahminic teacher who has tries to impressed by his intellect, has given the name to him. Now Ambedkar, who was born as and sometimes have been commonly called as Baba Saheb, was an Indian nationalist. He was a jurist, he was a Dalit political leader, and also was been seen as the chief architect of the Indian Constitution. He was the chairman of the drafting committee of the Constitution of India, and that was his significant contribution, his journey towards the Indian nationalism and also the Indian politics. But if we try to see his initial life struggle, we try to find out that he was born in a poor untouchable family, and he has spent most of his life in fighting against the social discrimination, especially the fighting against the system of this Chaturvarna, the four Varnas, that is the Brahmins, Kshatriyas, Vaishyas and Shudras, and also in a way fighting against the Indian caste system. He also has been seen significantly contributing towards the understanding of the Dalit Buddhist movement because of his inclination towards the understanding of Buddha, the disciple of Buddha. He also has been seen in that particular fashion. He has been the recipient of the Bharat Ratna. That of course is an important honor which has been given by Indian society to him. So in that way we try to see that Ambedkar was seen as a personality, an Indian personality which has its name and also which has contributed significantly both as a Dalit leader and also as a nationalistic leader. Now if we try to see a brief profile, initially he has his training from Elphinstone High School at Bombay. Later on of course he was entered into this Elphinstone College of Bombay, and he got a scholarship at the Columbia University in the New York, where he has done his MA examination in economics with sociology, history, philosophy and anthropology as the other subject for the study. He also has left Columbia University and has been conferred with the PhD degree from there. Returning to India, he has contributed significantly in terms of publications, especially some of his writings are reflected in the weekly that is called as the Muknayak. Muknayak basically the leader of the voiceless. The Muknayak, it basically represents the voices of the voiceless, and it has been found in 1924 with the contribution of Ambedkar. And later on, in extension to that, he has also formulated the Bahishkarit Hitkari Sabha. Bahishkarit Hitkari Sabha, which was also seen as an important organization which was working to uplift the depressed classes. And his contribution also is seen in 1927 when he has led an important silent revolution that is called as the Satyagraha that has been done in the Mahad. That is this we call as the Mahad Tank Satyagraha, where he tries to touch upon the water as a token of resistance against the untouchability for the lower caste, which were not been allowed to have the water from the common pools. And this Satyagraha was a meaningful act which was done on the Gandhian lines as a source of non-violence, he tried to represent himself and his community that why the people of the lower caste are not allowed to take water from the common places. Even the dogs and the animals can take water from can drink water from there, but the men, the lower caste, are not going to be allowed. So that is how he tries to put a plea for the masses that what amount of tyranny the lower caste people are facing when they are trying to speak about their representation in the Indian Hinduism, in that sense in the Indian caste system. And apart from that, his contribution also is seen very significantly fighting against Gandhi also, especially he was been part of the delegate of the round table conference that was in 1932. There of course he had a strong fight with Mahatma Gandhi, and to some extent there were certain amount of tussles which were been going on, especially the Pune Pact which have been there in 1932, where he had to have arguments which Mahatma Gandhi did not like, especially the provision for separate electorate which has been proposed by MacDonald Communal Award. So instead of refraining from it, Ambedkar tried to support that particular agenda, and Gandhi was trying to oppose it. So in that fashion we try to see that there were certain amount of political rivalries which have been there on certain issues. Ambedkar, which was been seen as not representing British, but somewhere trying to adjust with the policies of the British, and which has not been liked by Gandhi and many other leaders. And apart from that, his important contribution is also seen in terms of All India formation of All India Scheduled Caste Federation. All India Scheduled Caste Federation, which has marked its presence, especially we try to see it in 1942, and also we try to find out that he was the first law minister of the independent India, and later on of course the responsibility which has been given to him in terms of the formation of the Indian Constitution is again remarkable. And talking about his end life, I think that was again a sort of mysterious, in a sense that Ambedkar has in 1956 adopted and embraced Buddhism. Embracing Buddhism is a significant act which has been done by Ambedkar in a very judicious way. He was keen, and sometimes it was been seen as a symbol of moving away from the Hindu social order, especially when he was trying to embrace Buddhism. There was a strong opposition, but at the end of the day he had embraced Buddhism, and somewhere he has said that I am born as a Hindu, but I will not die as a Hindu, and at the end of his life he tries to prove that. And in 1956, he, after the embracement of Buddhism, he has been put to death on 6th of December. We have his death, which is been seen as a Maha Nirvana day. So that is how we try to see his life trajectory, and this life trajectory itself speaks about the very fact that whatsoever act and whatsoever issues which has been raised and has been projected by Ambedkar, they are seen as reflecting certain amount of what you can say assertion and also argumentation against the tyranny of Hinduism, especially the Brahminical hegemony which has been proposed and propounded by Hinduism, also has been strongly opposed by Ambedkar. Now, if you try to see, either it is the question of the Satyagraha on the Mahar tank, which was a very genuine concern in terms of representation of the Dalit masses who were not allowed from the assessment from the approachability towards the very natural resource, a basic resource in that sense as such, is a very significant act. and that also he tried to take it up in a very peaceful way. So if you try to see his style of reaction or his resistance, I think that also has a democratic mode, in a sense, in a very constitutional way, or rather in a very democratic way. He is trying to represent his resistance, and that is the art which make him a prominent leader. Thank you.